silver is a tricky metal. 70% is industrial and 30% is investment. And I look at silver, the outlook for silver, really not from physical industrial perspective, because it's always the investment demand that drive the metal prices or drive any market for that matter. So that just shows you how incredible the magnitude of investment demand and pressure or upside can be exerted by the investment demand towards a particular commodity, even the upside or the downside. So if you look at investment demand, then you're looking at say annual silver production is about 1 billion ounces. So the investment demand for silver is only 300 million ounces. At about $30 silver, it's a $10 billion investment demand for silver. So I think my point in answering your short answer is nobody would have a clue what's going to happen to silver. Nobody knew silver is going to go from 15 to 50 in 1980. The one brother came in, or silver went from again 20 to 50 in early 2011 when a few Chinese rumored Hong Kong people went and bought a couple $100 million physical silver. And nor do we know the reason silver went from 18 to right now 33.
So what we've done there is taken what is a mine that was producing using what we call sub-level cave, and we're changing the mining methods to something that is going to extract the resource far more efficiently. We're going to use paste-fill mining methods there, and will also allow us to place the tailings underground. And we've changed our tailings deposition strategy as well. So there's no longer any need to build any surface tailings facility. So we'll be using effectively the existing tailings facility will be the last facility. We're going to have dry stack tailings and paste backfill going underground. So that's all going to be complete by the end of this year as well. So in essence, what the business now does, we produced just under $104 million of revenue in the first half from those two mines, and had an EBITDA margin of 47%. So just around $49 million of EBITDA, which is a really good rate of return for a mining company, and free cash flow generation of $30 million from those two assets just in the first half. So that sort of gives you an idea of just how profitable these assets are for us. So really good little business, and zero debt on the balance sheet now gives us that flexibility to look at the next stage. And as I mentioned earlier, that's what I'm very excited about. So keeping those operations going and then getting, again, the next phase.
But one of the things that I think happens is the market is a herd mentality. And when somebody finally realizes that a company like World Copper, for example, if Zonia was able to put out 100 million pounds or 70 million pounds of copper for 10 to 15 years, it's certainly worth more than $12 million market cap. So we're way undervalued, and I think sometimes the catalyst is everybody looks at the sector and just looks at the asset base and says, this makes no sense. Like, these companies are worth way more than this, and they herd turns and says, we need to start getting these to reasonable, at least moving them toward something that makes more sense. And then once that happens, everybody jumps in. And then I think it's called FOMO these days. I'm an old guy, so FOMO is fear of missing out. And if one group starts to move it, and then everybody has to jump in. That's why in 2003, 2004, it was sort of a much longer growth cycle.
We completed a transaction to acquire these projects, and have pivoted a lot of our focus and expenditure onto the West African opportunities. Particularly the opportunity to get into Côte d'Ivoire. I mean, all of West Africa, it's the Man Craton. They're Proterozoic rocks. It's similar to the rocks that the Abitibi Belt hosts in Canada, or the Eastern Goldfields. Each are hundreds of millions of ounces discovered. You have that same Proterozoic greenstone style gold mineralization in West Africa, which has only really seen a lot of exploration attention over the last 20 years. But that's resulted in West Africa being the fastest growing gold production center in the world. So it's seen more increase in both gold production and gold discoveries over the last 20 years. A lot of that is from the neighboring countries. Of course, Ghana has a long history of gold mining to the east of Côte d'Ivoire. And in the last 20 years, a lot of gold was discovered in Burkina and Mali, who had good sovereign risk profiles to them and solid mining code reforms to them in the early 2000s. brought a lot of exploration investment into them. Côte d'Ivoire has a bit more history of conflict, civil war, and a coup through the 2000s and early teens, but have had stable elections, and everything's kind of flipped there, where now you get a bit more political risk. In Burkina Mali, they've become much more challenging to work in from a securities perspective.
And I think what I found along the way is the smaller the organisation, the easier it is to set a culture that you want, because you can't impose a culture on an existing sort of monolithic giant organisation, because it's already cemented, if you like. But if in a smaller organisation you can set your own culture, and I think it's important because particularly in exploration, statistically you're going to fail 99 times out of 100. So it can be very dispiriting. It's a roller coaster of highs and lows emotionally. As you develop targets, you get excited, you test them, it looks good, and then there's a disappointment, and you just keep on having to come back and come back. So if you don't have a good culture, you just go crazy doing that. You've got to believe in what you're doing, and you have to be adaptive as well. So you need to be able to change strategy. And a lot of people focus on strategy, but it's culture that transcends everything else. I used to say culture trumped strategy, but there's too many connotations with that word now. So I say transcend strategy. And culture's like the glue that sticks everything else together. So when things are going well, it's easy, but when things aren't going well, it's the culture that I think makes a difference. And if you've got a good culture, you can keep a good team together, they can all contribute, and there's various things that having the right culture enables, like being innovative, collaborating, and probably most importantly, being able to communicate openly.
We really believe potash business very strong in the long term. Very strong fundamentals at the end of the day is a population growing, a request for food growing significantly while arable land is decreasing. The only way you can be more productive with less land to feed more people is through fertilizers, like potash, nitrogen, phosphates, the NPK, famous NPK formula. With especially Europe and even in Canada, where the other asset now that we are vending in is a lot of mines, but especially Europe, very old, getting into decline, and the supply also struggling to some extent. But in the long run, we see obviously very steady demand coming up for fertilizers. In the a bit more short-term term, of course, the number 2 and 3 global producers are Russia and Belarus. That was very important through, obviously, following the war in Ukraine and some of the sanctions to Belarus, Europe, and some of the flow of potash that used to come from Russia to Belarus to Europe, not anymore, really being supplied by Canada, which is number 1 producer. But again, from our perspective in Muga, we feel sheltered from that to a big extent, considering we will be servicing mostly the European market, and that is, by the way, the biggest, strongest point of competitive advantage of Muga, to be in the middle of the European market. So when we see longer term, very strong market, and we are going through the usual cycle.
It's potentially the largest resource in the heart of the United States, JORC resource. It's got 2.34 billion tonnes, and it is in the state of Wyoming, which is right in the heart of the US. It's about 3 hours out of Denver. And look, this is an amazing project. It's potentially the largest rare earth resource, like I said, in the heart of the US, and that's what sets us apart. And look, what's unique is that, well, not unique, but the US has the largest challenge, which is around really onshoring these critical materials. And so what really sets us apart to other rare earth companies in this space is that there are some other great projects around the globe, like in Brazil, Australia, but it's all about location. And our rare earth project, it's not only large, but it's a great project. It is in the United States, the largest economy in the world, which has really one of the largest problems, which is that it does not produce any and refine it currently any neodymium, praseodymium. And so that's the opportunity for us, is to really be that company that's not just mining, but then producing a metal in the United States for selling to magnet manufacturers and end users of these materials in the US.
Yeah, I think that what we're trying to do in Equivest is that we're trying to use mineral systems to ask the right questions. And we're trying to answer those questions using AI and data, because it's much quicker, it's much more accurate, and we're using data and not gut feeling. But I think the problem is that most of the tools that geologists use today, they were never designed for mineral exploration. And they were never designed to run machine learning and advanced analytics on large geospatial datasets. So this is when we started at Equivest. We started by building our own exploration data platform so that we can bring the tools of AI and machine learning into the hands of geologists. It really helps on the speed and the quality at which we answer questions. For instance, when we were working together with BHP, we came across a paper that was mapping rock formation that turned out to be really critical to our mineral systems models. But the problem is that it was only mapped in a very small area. And what we can do then is that we can use machine learning together with hyperspectral satellite data. We can extract the particular spectral signature of that formation, and we could map it across 2 million square kilometers. And that's just an example of how powerful such tools can be.
We saw this writing on the wall, and we saw that there was an opening for mining to really come back in a big way to New Zealand. Oceanic Gold and Newmont have been in New Zealand for a long time, and they've produced gold out of there since the 1980s. And a long history, over 40 million ounces have come out of there, but there's just been limited expansion. And so under this new government, to fix some of these problems, what they've done is they've introduced a fast-track approval bill. And this fast-track approval bill aims to take permitting for an infrastructure, a major infrastructure project, whether it's mining, whether it's housing. It takes it from permitting of what was historically 2 or 3 years down to 6 months. And in the mining space, that's huge, because so many issues in the world these days, everyone is talking about holding time and permitting time, and shareholders are sick of sitting on the sidelines for 5 years waiting for something to be permitted. And so this 6-month time frame gives a real good finite time to shareholders, something that's within their remit of waiting for. It's bringing back investment to New Zealand. And there's some really good news stories out of there.